Live from Orlando, Florida, you're now listening to the OZone Podcast, the voice of Orlando Magic fans. Join us every week for a unique fan perspective on all of the latest Magic news and updates. The show starts now.
What's up, Magic fans? Welcome back to another episode of the OZone Podcast, brought to you by DraftKings and part of the Basketball Podcast Network. We are your hosts, Al, myself, Anthony, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Orlando Magic beat writer from the Orlando Sentinel, Khobi Price. What's up, man?
What up? How y'all doing?
Good, man. Really happy that you took some time to join us today, because we definitely wanted to pick your brain right before our first stint out in the Summer League in Vegas. But before we really get into that and start talking about it, Khobi, you finally finished this past season with the Orlando Magic, starting your first full season with us. What have you liked about that experience? We know that you came from down south, but now you're in Orlando. How has that transition been for you?
Yeah, no, for sure. First off, thanks for having me on. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to this. The transition has been smooth, to be honest. I've enjoyed getting acclimated to Orlando, to the team, learning more about the team. Honestly, with each passing week, each passing month, I finally, not that long, maybe a couple months ago, I watched the Magic Moment. Just to get a little bit of a feel for what's going on. Like, it's stuff that I was aware of, but just almost like, oh yeah, there's that, there's this. And honestly, just reading old stories. I did a story on Grant Hill because I spoke with him a little bit after his book came out. And the cool thing about that was just like relearning, or if that makes sense, like relearning things that you knew, but you didn't really know, then like finding out new details, especially how it relates to the Magic. So just learning more about the history has been really dope. And then also, like I said, getting acclimated to the city, figuring out what's what, getting my bearings on the surroundings has been fun.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask because, coming from down south, how much of getting up to speed did you really need jumping into, the Magic season last season?
Yeah, it was more so just getting up to speed with, I guess more so like not the duties or responsibilities, but more so like the pace of an NBA season. I've done backup work on an NBA beat before when I was in South Florida. I did backup work, covering the Miami Heat for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. But the pacing of NBA season is so much different than like college football season. Just the amount of games, you have, college football is like you get a game every week for however many weeks, basically the fall. Late summer and the fall. Basketball is just like you get 2, 3, sometimes even 4 games a week. And it's like, right. How do you balance this? How do you do that? How do you incorporate this? So many different aspects you're trying to incorporate in a season. How do you make stuff stretch? When do you have to like bounce on something, X, Y, and Z? So that was the big thing, just learning the ins and outs of it, and still learning now, to be honest with you. But that was like the biggest adjustment for me. And then, you're learning about the team. The thing is, I was such like if you want to call me like an NBA head, before I took this job. So I had an awareness of the Magic, even though they weren't, winning. I had an awareness of them and just like where they were at in terms of their team. I knew, grew up in Chicago, so I knew they, traded Vucevic. I saw the trade Ingram. I remember actually I was with my stepdad. I was in his house when like all the trades were happening. And we were like, I felt like it was like every 20 minutes I would go upstairs, come back down. Did you see this? Chicago, and I come back up and go back upstairs. They traded Gordon, and I was like, okay, yeah. So I knew, and I had an idea.
Dumpster fire.
Yeah, we were just talking. I remember this would have been March 2021. I would have been at his house, and we were just talking about it, like all the things they were doing. I remember that vividly, so it's kind of funny, almost like a full circle thing. But just having that in my mind and keeping up with them as much as I could, where I was at before, it made for smooth-ish transition, but it was just more so like the duties and responsibilities. That's just not duties and responsibilities, ins and outs, the details that you may not know until you're actually in it. That's the more, I guess, the thing that I need to adjust to the most.
I feel like if you have anyone, or if you know anyone that's, especially now, because now would be the great time for anyone that maybe was on the edge to wanting to follow the Magic more, or maybe they're a fan of Paolo and now they want to follow the Magic. I feel like this Magic Moment is like the perfect documentary to get your feet wet and to kind of get the history, because it does a really good job at kind of bringing everything together. Because from what it feels like, it kind of feels like, that documentary kind of repeated itself one too many times afterwards. So it's definitely a good way to get acclimated.
No, I agree. It's it's a smooth one. It's a smooth one. I would suggest it completely.
Now, Khobi, with that being said, again, you got pretty much now what many consider a dream job. Covering an NBA team, getting to travel, hang out with the players all the time, interview them. Looking back at it now, it's heading into your season 2 now. In my mind, after the draft, it's a new season, right? So, heading into season 2 now with the Magic, what was your most memorable moment in your first stint with covering the team? Anything that just jumps at you was like, whoa, that was a wow moment for me.
Yeah, there were a couple. I mean, it was more. If there was just one, I'll say this one. The moment that still like comes back to me, and it just keeps coming back to me, is the moment where Markelle checks in for the first time after coming back from his injury, and like seeing the hug that he gave Coach Jamal Mosley, for checking into the game, and like I'm pretty sure he checked in for Cole Anthony. It was like kind of, because I feel like it was like during a free throw or something like that, or maybe like during they called a timeout and he just went in. But that was a moment, I recorded it too, and I was just like, oh yeah, I could tell, like, because when I joined the beat, obviously he was injured, and like people were like, so like, people hitting me up like, where's Markelle at? What's he doing? Et cetera, et cetera. And then like, so I could tell how anxious people were to see Markelle back out there. But that moment almost made it clear, oh yeah, they really rock with this dude. And the love that they showed, leading up to that day, and especially that day, was just like, okay, yeah, I see everything now. I see how much Magic fans how much they really, like I said, rock with Markelle.
Now, I got to say, on behalf of all Magic fans, especially Magic Twitter, man, we loved you those days. You kept us busy those days. The clips coming out with Markelle shooting. And that's one thing you'll know about Magic fans. Actually, Philly fans too, back in the days. Anything with Markelle will get you a ton of likes, a ton of retweets on Twitter. But I recall that. That's actually when you jumped at me, like knowing you covered the team. You kept putting those clips out there as the date got closer of his debut in his comeback from injury. It's all those clips you kept throwing at us and just kept feeding us at least something with Markelle, because again, we died for that content. There was nothing going on. We were losing a bunch of games. That gave us hope. So on behalf of all Magic fans, thank you so much for all those clips. Because again, it truly kept us motivated, at least with the year that we had.
Yeah, absolutely. Just doing my job, trying to keep everybody updated and informed on the ongoings of the team and Markelle's, comeback from the injury. So it's, like I said, just doing my job, more than my pleasure.
Yeah, because I'm sure you're well aware now, but just the amount of secrecy that there was, and there was also a void with, not having someone covering the team from The Athletic and the Orlando Sentinel. So when you hopped in, you filled such a major void. And I just want to take a moment and say thank you, because you've done an amazing job. So I'm sure you've already heard it, because I read it all the time, people giving you compliments. Just wanted to reaffirm that all those compliments are definitely well warranted. So,
man, y'all, I appreciate y'all, man. We gotta move on to something else. Y'all giving me too. Y'all,
yeah. We gotta give you that.
I sincerely appreciate y'all. I really do, and I appreciate, I guess it's like a moment, since the season is kind of transitioning to the second season covering the team. I do want to appreciate you guys, but also everybody who's followed along, whether it's on Twitter or actually, subscribing. That's honestly the best way to support and like to keep up with everything. Subscribing to the Orlando Sentinel. That's the best way to keep up with work. With my work, I should say, regardless of how you interacted, read, watched, etc. I appreciate you. It means a lot to me. And I sincerely do mean that. I just can't, these flowers are just, I got y'all giving too many flowers. I only got 2 hands. So we're going to save some. All right. But I appreciate y'all. For real.
Let's switch up the mood. Free agency. All right. So the Magic decided to kind of bring everything back and kind of stick with what we've seen, what we know. And for the most part, the fan base is kind of split, right? Some people are for it, and they understand the reasons why we're bringing back Gary Harris, Mo Bamba, even the little bit of Bobo that we got. But the other half are kind of saying, man, why didn't we do more? Why didn't we go a different route? What is your opinion behind that? What is the reason by it? Why is it that the front office is really deciding just to take the same 22 win season that we got last season and bring it back with what we're hoping for, a healthy Markelle, Jonathan Isaac, and now the addition of Paolo?
So I think there's multiple layers to that. So to answer your question, one, I think they look at the team from last year, and health plays a factor into it. So let's just say, get a healthy Markel back. Sometimes we forget, about Jalen too. Like he only played, I think 45, 46, somewhere in the mid 40s range of games, maybe 44 games. Missing time with the thumb and then the ankle toward the end of the season. Health played a significant factor in how the season went. And even if you go into the season thinking, we're not going to win a lot of games, that aspect of it was very significant. I think, some of it's kind of skewed because it was also like E'Twaun Moore, Michael Carter-Williams, and Jonathan Isaac taking up like the injury time in terms of how many games were missed because of COVID or injuries. But the Magic had the most missed games because of COVID or injuries that, like this past season, if I recall it correctly. So I think, the management looks at this team thinking to themselves, yes, this is a young team. This is a team that, is going to experience a lot of growing pains, but there's a version of last year's team. Don't forget next year's team, just last year's team that is much better than what it is. If not, I'm saying fully healthy, we just have better health, right? If Markel comes back, if he's not, he's either not hurt or he comes back earlier, not saying he could have, but if he's just around more, there's a better version of that team last year. There's a better version of that team if, maybe they prioritize playing some of their older guys a little bit more, right? Like there are better versions of last year's team that just weren't shown for multiple different reasons. I'm not going to speak for every reason. Y'all can probably figure out why some versions of the team, especially late in the season, weren't shown.
Right.
But so I think they look at this team thinking our team isn't, our record isn't fully reflective of our team. I think that's one part of it, right? Two, these are all, I could be wrong, but like most of these guys are like 25 or under. I think, if you're looking at the roster, how it is right now, I think the only guys who would be older are Terrence Ross, Gary Harris, and Devin Kennedy. I could be wrong if someone's like just turned 26 or it's like exactly 25 right now. I can't remember Devin's age off my top of my head, but I thought he just turned 26. Like this is a very young team, and there's going to be more growth ahead of them. And I think this team is very much invested in seeing, which guys stand out from one another. Like last year, sometimes it was so tough. Like I said, not just because of the injuries, but also the COVID factor. And yes, they have to evaluate what they can in front of them. But I think they want another shot of, hey, let's give our young guys more responsibilities. Let's give them another full, like true offseason, a real offseason for most of them to develop, to work on their games, to come back better the next season. And this 2022-2023 season will be a better reflection of their skills, their talents, where they're progressing than last season was. I think those aspects of it too. And then, like I said, if you get better health, with Markel being, Markel won't have to, he can actually work on his game, not just work on rehabbing. He can actually truly dedicate his entire summer to his game. Same with Cole Anthony. Same with Chuma Okeke. He was hurt. He was hurt coming into the season. And then I think even, before his rookie season, he was coming out of, he tore his ACL and said, rehabbing back from that. That's why he didn't, sign immediately after being drafted. Like a lot of guys were working out of things coming into the season. Maybe we don't know what's going to happen with Jonathan Isaac. He'll, is supposed to play at some point this season. So there's a better version of this team, a healthier, if that team is healthier too. And I just think they just want to see it progress. And the other aspect of it is, I'll wrap it up with this. There wasn't a whole lot for them to do outside of getting their own guys back. Like, if you really look at it, yes, the Kevin Durant thing materialized when it did. But, I mean, even if you're the most optimistic person, Kevin Durant's not going to come to Orlando for this stage of his career. Like, Kevin Durant is most likely going to be traded to a team that has something where he feels like, all right, I'm competing for a championship day in and day out. Even with the things that are being traded for me, I'm going to a contender. It's funny. Paolo Banchero posted that picture of him, Kevin Durant. What's even funnier is that Paolo was just drafted. So I don't know how he got like a Photoshop of himself so quickly. I guess he had that, but like someone's on either he or someone on the team's working extra hard for these Photoshops because he just got drafted. But he posted that, and the joke is, Paolo, man, if Kevin Durant's coming to Orlando, you're going to be one of those guys going back, right? I hope you just know
he's a centerpiece.
Centerpiece. You are the centerpiece of that trade, Paolo. I hope you realize that. So that wasn't going to happen. And then, I know there was talk about DeAndre Ayton like, again, this team has the bigs it wants. Like, they just also got Paolo. I didn't even mention him. It's like, that's another aspect of why they're okay with running back. Like, that's the most, like, the draft is funny because it happened 2 weeks ago, however long it goes. We almost forget, oh yeah, Paolo Banchero's on this team now. That also changes the dynamics of this team. So there has been change that we just don't think about because it's like kind of more distant, it's not as flashy or whatever it may be. But there weren't as many options as people may think for this team. Like I said, Kevin Durant, that was new, but you're going to be running from anyway. DeAndre Ayton, I mean, maybe, but it didn't really make sense with where you're at in your team, unless you were really then you're really shaking the ground for that. Anthony Simons, I mean, I know people really wanted him to come back home, but it would have taken a lot to just take him from Portland. I mean, as we see, as what other contracts Portland gave him. So there's a lot of factors as to why this isn't your summer to take a swing. Next summer, and it's been alluded to, maybe it's a better possibility, but this wasn't it. And I don't blame the Magic. I think the Magic actually had the right idea of, we like this group, we like our young guys, let them develop. Let's get another year with this. And, the details of Gary Harris's contract have come to fruition a little bit. I've heard about Mo Bamba's deal possibly having some kind of something on the second year where there's a little bit of team flexibility for the Magic. I would imagine Bol, I don't think it's going to be a substantial amount of money, but I would imagine he would have something on the second year of his deal is going to leave some flexibility for the Magic. So they'll have another crack at it while also getting another year for a better realization of what these guys are and what this team is.
I think that's a cool part. So the Magic, again, didn't really hurt themselves long term. Like you said, Gary Harris, all we've known is second year is not guaranteed. Mo Bamba, not official yet. We're hearing some things as well. So this time next year, we could be having a whole different discussion. It's like, hey, they picked the young guys they liked. They made some trades, and now they're signing some free agents. That could easily be happening again 12 months from now. We just got to be patient and let this thing play out. But I did want to ask you, you're covering the team. Two guys that we talked about all really the last 3-4 months of the season was Mo Bamba and Gary Harris coming back. That was a topic that we consistently talked about in the podcast. To actually see them come back was kind of surprising, especially after the Magic, decided to not pick up the qualifying offer on Mo Bamba. Gary Harris being a vet that can fit so many contending teams out there, he chose to come back to Orlando. Number one, were you surprised? Number two, what do you think that sends as a message to the NBA about the city of Orlando, what they're building here in Orlando?
Yeah, so was I surprised? I wasn't too surprised. And I even mentioned this in my story, when I mentioned that, the Magic weren't putting out the qualifying offer. And I tried to explain in the story, I'll try to explain it now again. The Magic, as we see them not extending the qualifying offer, was not because they weren't interested in bringing Mo back. Sometimes when a player's in restricted free agency, especially a quote unquote non-max player or non-designated max player, it can get really sticky. It's a sticky situation, especially when we're talking about, offer sheets and, sign here, but then it's going to be 2 days until, you have 2 days to match. It can be very tough for everybody. It can be tough for the incumbent team because, their money's going to be tied up or they're trying to figure things out. It can be tough for the player because they're trying to figure out where I'm going to go. Does the team really want me or not? If they really wanted me, then why am I going through this, whole process? And then it can be tough for the team that's trying to make an offer sheet because it's we want this guy, but we don't know even if we sign him to this offer sheet, we don't know if we're going to get him because this team could just match. And now our whole free agency is just maybe not blowing up, but it's just a lot more complicated. So the Magic not offering the offer sheet wasn't about them not wanting him. It was just about doing what was right for them and Mo. Ultimately, they brought him back, which, like I said, I wasn't surprised by because even, doing all this, I was hearing that they really liked Mo. Mo really liked Orlando. They wanted to bring him back, as long as it made sense for both sides. And ultimately he did. So I wasn't surprised. I mean, if you asked me at the beginning of free agency or beginning of offseason, I was told it was 50-50, at the time. And even I felt that kind of way. It's yeah, he could go. I was more convinced of, I think we're just going to come down to the financials. I thought he was going to get different offers from outside teams, right? But I think some of those outside teams kind of made their other decisions that maybe change Mo's market. I'm thinking of teams like, the Pistons, right? They were a team that obviously was looking for a big man, but they wound up, trading for Jalen Duren, right? Charlotte was a team that I was thinking about too, but I forget who they got off the top of my head. But they were a team that was no longer in the market for Mo. So the stuff happens over the course of the offseason, it changes. So I wasn't surprised by him. Gary was a little bit more surprising, just because he's a guy that, especially some teams that are looking to contend, could really use a guy like that, as a 2 guard, or even just a guy, a 3-and-D wing who you can just seamlessly fit into any lineup. So I was more surprised that he returned. I talked with Gary. He seemed to really like being in Orlando. He liked being around the team. We talked about that kind of later in March, early April during the road trip. But so I wasn't surprised about his interest in coming back. I was just surprised it worked out to that point, because I thought other teams would have pursued him harder. But this is also an offseason which there wasn't a whole lot of cap space around the league, just because of, I think still the pandemic effects on financials and the salary cap. There's going to be, I think, another big significant jump next year. But there weren't many teams. Like the Magic were one of the few teams working with real cap space, like significant enough cap space. And to answer your last question, I think it says a lot about the city, but more so this team, this group, that those guys will want to come back, especially more so a guy like Gary and where he's at in his career. It says a lot about what this team is building, what this group is doing, that a guy would want to, even if it's for another year or two, however long it's going to be, or even if it's half a season, continue to invest his time in, especially for a player, you don't know how much longer your career is going to be. So to invest your time into a team like this, that says a lot.
Yeah, and I think that it does say a whole lot that they want to come back, especially because last season we're the second worst team in the NBA. So the fact that they want to come back when they have an opportunity to be able to look elsewhere, I think it really goes to show that the Magic do have a really good group. And whether you're looking on social media, and I'm sure that you see it in person, they really look like they enjoy being around one another. And I feel like at the very least, team chemistry is something that we do have. Now, how do we build everything around that? Now, a lot of people's, I guess, the debate with the teams that there's not enough veterans. When you look at the roster, you have, Gary Harris. You can consider Markelle and Jonathan Isaac young vets, but then you have Terrence Ross. Now, what are you looking at with Terrence Ross? This offseason, we've heard him be vocal on his podcast on whether or not he feels like it's time for him to be able to move on, but he's still on the roster now. Is this something that you see that we're just gonna have to kind of wait around what happens around the getting closer to the trading season, or what do you think we end up doing with Terrence Ross? Does he just sit here and embrace being a veteran?
Yeah, the Terrence thing has been going on. I've spoken with him. He's spoken on his own platforms, other platforms. I think it's very clear that Terrence would, he has an interest in continuing his career somewhere else, especially, at this point. I talked about Gary and, earlier talked about Gary and how, teams would be, contending teams would be interested in him, especially, Gary's in the prime of his career and where he's at. He had one of his healthier seasons this last year. Terrence, he's even a little bit more advanced in his career than Gary is. So teams would especially, even Terrence especially would, have an even greater incentive to maybe, try to continue his career on a team that, can give him a better chance at contending for a title than the Magic will currently. My expectation is that Terrence is going to be on this roster come the start of the season. That could obviously change, especially how, we're seeing the dynamics of the league kind of shifting right now a little bit, maybe not. Like, I think there's going to be a significant fallout league-wide from whatever happens with not just Kevin Durant, but also DeAndre Ayton. Some of that can be hand in hand, and how that affects other teams, I'm not entirely sure, because once these teams make whatever moves, there's probably going to be a team or two that's just like, we need players, right? We need to fill out our roster, but not just any players. We need good players, and Terrence could be a candidate, an expiring deal at $11.5 million, just over the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. He can be a player that teams try to target. He's just like, all right, we need to fill out our roster with a solid vet. Where can we get that guy at? All right, Terrence, let's see what we can work out. But as of right now, my expectation is he's going to start the season on the team, on the Magic specifically, I should say.
And then Khobi, kind of transitioning into the summer league. You've been in the practices. They've been practicing all this past week. We already saw the players already landing in Vegas for their upcoming game against the Houston Rockets. But was there anything that really stood out to you during these practices? A lot of the fan base, they were able to see, the main thing is Paolo working really closely with Most and Paolo really pushing him around a little bit, and Most also embracing it. Is there anything else that you kind of saw throughout that time period that really, really stood out to you?
Yeah, I joked actually with Mosley that he was holding a towel when we were speaking with him, like behind his back. And I joked with him like, "Hey, you holding your back after all that work with Paolo down there?" He's like, "No, I'm just holding the towel." I was like, I was just messing with him." That was the biggest thing, honestly. And we've seen this with Mosley. Yeah, I guess since he's been hired, obviously the viral picture of him, who was that defending Jalen? Was it last training camp? I think that's who it was, Jalen Suggs.
Yep, I know Mo Bamba too.
Yeah, Mo Bamba. And I saw one time I was speaking with him after a practice, and I had a clip of him like working with Franz Wagner on his like Franz like his Euro step, you want to call it, and he was coaching him up on it, and that's like the big thing about Mosley. He's hands on. He's in it with them. And I was talking with Rick Carlisle for a story I was working on about Mosley that came out in March, and he just talked about NBA players are so dynamic. They're so athletic. You got to be in like pristine shape to be able to do this kind of stuff. Even just like if you're not going like all out, like trying to block their shots or whatever, just to be able to keep up with them on the floor and bang with them. That's you have to be in like a different kind of shape. And to Mosley's credit, he seems to be holding up well. Saw him with RJ and Paolo, a clip of them. I think they were working on pick and roll coverage or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But he's in it with them. But the big thing is that it's, I guess, more Paolo specific, mostly telling him like, hey, be forceful, use your strength, punish people. And he's not just saying that, like Mosley's not just saying that from like a distance, like blowing the whistle, hey, do this, that. He's telling him like right behind his back, hey man, I'm guarding you. Push me back further. Put your weight on me. Don't be afraid, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's something like a detail that may get overlooked, 3 weeks, 3 years, etc. But those are the kinds of things that I think players can kind of gravitate towards because they're like, oh yeah, this dude's in it with me, 100%.
That's the cool thing about Mosley, man. I think we've seen he's such a player's coach. Like he's in it with the guys. He's really part of the experience with them. So again, it's an outsider looking in. You love to see that from your coach, especially a young coach. Second season in the NBA, he's truly grinding with this guy. So you love to see that. Now, talking about Paolo real quick, what do you expect from him here in Summer League? I know, again, first game's coming up tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday night against the Rockets. And surprisingly enough, it's against Jabari Smith, a guy that we expected the Magic to draft for many, many weeks. I know Anthony's excited here. That's going to be fun, number one. So what do you expect from Paolo, number one? And number two, Chet put on a show last night, which, again, people had people in national media already talking about how, hey, the Magic made a mistake. Magic fans were kind of debating, did we make the right pick without seeing Paolo play yet? It's the funny part. So, two-part question. What do you expect from Paolo tomorrow night? And then Chet, what were your takes on his first game?
I'll go with Chet first. So first off, I think we were talking about this offline. Man, let me be respectful. There's only so much for me to take away from a game like that, right? Like that Jazz team was. It wasn't the kind of players that Chet's going to even in the Vegas Summer League. I actually don't know. I need to look at the Jazz roster. But even like when preseason starts, that's not the caliber competition Chet's going to play. That's not taken away from Chet's game. Like there were things, if you look at process-wise, super impressive. I was so very impressed by how he played the gap. And this is something he did in college, but played the gap, as the pick and roll defender. And just being able to like corral the ball handle, but also stay close to the roll man, like that kind of stuff. I was just like, oh yeah, he's got that down. Anticipation's down. Not having to jump, to contest a shot, and then you jump, like timing's on it down. And I will admit, the fadeaway, the pull up fadeaway, the pull up behind from beyond the arc, those were nice. My thing and this is not. So I thought Chet was impressive, and it was great to see. I'm happy for him. I'm happy that he had that kind of performance. It's really dope. I don't want to take away anything from it at all. My thing is, I'm more, especially with Summer League, it's more about process to me than the results. It's more about what guys do. Like I said, the biggest thing to me about Chet wasn't just the shots he made. It was how those shots came, or how, not just the blocks, but how those blocks came, how those contests came, how he played how the process of him as a defender, like I said, in the pick and roll, keeping things in front of him. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for, more so than the actual like does he go? I don't even know what he went. Would he go like 5 for 7 on threes or 5 for 6, something like that? Like that's great to see. And Gaudy's, I think I even wrote this. Gaudy's stat lines are awesome, but to me, this is more of a process game than a results game, at least when it comes to summer league. So going to Paolo, that's what I'm really looking for. I'm looking to see, Mosley's really got on him and like, hey, you should be physical, etc. I'm trying to see like how much does that physicality carry over for Paolo from college through these summer league practices, throughout summer league, into the games. I'm also trying to see, what are his reads as a passer, right? Like, how is his processing speed as a passer? Is he making the right reads? Are they a little slow? Is his timing there? I think Paolo's a good passer, but this is the kind of stuff when you're adjusting to the speed of an NBA game, the rhythm, etc. Your timing may not always be on point as it would be, if you played in college or if you had more time. And I know this isn't the NBA preseason or regular season, but it's still against, other professionals who are going to be a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, just a little bit more than what you face in college. So that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. Are his rotations on point? Is he on point with whatever defensive schemes they're going to be running out, throughout the summer league? That's the kind of stuff that I would look for, and not just from Paolo, but every player. How's the aggressiveness? How's the energy from him? Especially, you're getting a good taste of what NBA life is like, right? You play on Thursday, you play Saturday, you play Monday, and then you play, I think, Thursday again. So it's just like a game every other day, and then you get maybe 2 days in between, then you play another game. So that you're getting a little bit like, how is his energy from game to game? He may not play in every game, but how do you fall into that rhythm? It's just like a taste of it, if that makes sense. And you're not traveling though, so like that aspect, it's almost like a homestand in that sense.
Yeah, and I think that for the most part, it's summer league, so you really can't get caught up on stats. We've seen this up close in person with Franz Wagner, who didn't have a very impressive summer league, and preseason wasn't all that great, but the minute that it was real, game time, he was a player that we've really like learned to love really quickly. Now, Paolo, his very first game is going to be against Jabari Smith. Are you looking for anything in particular in regards to that specific matchup? And I think that one of the biggest things that people are looking at is, one, Paolo didn't think he was going to go number one, and Jabari did think he was going to go number one. Should we be looking closely at that matchup just because of kind of the storylines and the headlines that are circling around them too specifically?
I wouldn't look too much into it, especially since it is summer league. Yeah, it'll be the first time they play since the draft. But I mean, I wouldn't personally. Like I said, there's just so much going on throughout this, I guess, week and a half. It is an interesting thing to at least watch, but I'm not sure. Like, kind of like with the Chet thing, I don't want to like take away from anything he did. Like what he did Tuesday night was great. It was great to see. It was entertaining, and he was able, like, there were things in the process of what he did that is real with him, right? Like what Chet did, there are real things, tangible things that I do believe will translate to the season when it starts. But with Jabari versus Paolo, just kind of like, I mean, unless they truly like match up one-on-one. So that would actually be interesting to me if they actually like were guarding one another. And there may be like I said, more process things that you can pick apart. Maybe not from storyline, but it's like, hey, how does Jabari handle physicality if Paolo's posting him up on whatever the left block, the right block, or even if he's in the pinch post? How is Paolo moving on the perimeter if he's going Jabari and Jabari is running through screens, coming off a pin down, or whatever it may be. Like that kind of stuff you can pick up more so. And that's less about like the storyline of it, just more about the matchup. Like how, like I said, more process. How does this player handle this? And maybe it's just something to work on. And sometimes, like you said with Franz, sometimes it's like, hey, you have a bad week, and you have nothing else to show for it.
It is.
Yeah, sometimes you just have a bad week. Look, Vegas is hot, man. So some guys did like, dang, I don't know what's going on here. I know what Franz was out in Michigan for a couple of years, so he's like, dang, Ann Arbor, this ain't Ann Arbor, man. This is different. This is different. So sometimes it's just you have a bad week, and then people think, oh, I had a bad summer league. You only got a week. So there have been guys who have been summer league, have not performed well at summer league, and they have good careers or good seasons the following season. There have been summer league legends that you just don't hear about again. So
shout out Kevin Knox.
Oh wow, whew, that's a throwback. I forgot about.
So you're going to be getting to Vegas early in the morning to cover the next upcoming game. So we're definitely looking forward to hearing some of the behind the scenes stories coming out of that. Kind of transitioning into our Patreon members mailbag, where our Patreons were able to submit some questions directly to you, Khobi. And one of the first things that they wanted to know is, in your opinion, who do you feel is going to have the biggest breakout on this roster? If we're not including obviously Paolo, but who do you think will definitely take things to the next level? Who has the best shot of doing so?
So there's weird because I have like multiple answers to this question depending on how you ask it. Breakout, I want to say Cole. Because it's funny. I was asked a different version of this question. It was just I forget how it was worded, but it was like, who do you think surprises people most next season compared to last season? I said Wendell. I think people kind of maybe not forgot, but because of you draft Paolo and Markelle came back, X, Y, and Z, like all this stuff happened towards the end of the season. Like I think people almost overlooked how good of how much Wendell progressed as the season went on.
Yes.
And that's not to say he's going to be the 20 or whatever it was, like 19 and 11, 20 and 10 guy he was at the end of the season to start next season. But there was real tangible growth almost like each and every month, especially from November, December on, that he made. And I think he's going to come out this season, just knowing him, the work ethic, how much he's investing in himself, and how, he's not satisfied at all with the growth he made, the progress he made as a player. I think he's going to maybe not surprise people. He's going to remind people at least, like, hey, I'm you can agree or disagree with this comment, but Jeff Wiltman said that he thinks Wendell solidified himself as the top center. I think Wendell's going to come out and be like, hey, there's no maybes about this, man. Like, I'm here. And I think that's something that I don't know if people are like, I don't know how much that's on people's minds right now. It's like where Wendell can go with his career as a guy who's, he dominated the simple parts of the game last season. Like, he really got better. Just like, hey, all those simple things, the putbacks, transition, all the simple stuff, we're taking what do you call it? The low-hanging fruit. We're eating that. We're eating all that low-hanging fruit. We're getting that. It's all good. And then build off that. You get a little bit more responsibilities as a offensive hub, a little bit more responsibilities in isolation, a little bit more responsibilities on the post. We're building on that. So I think you'll have a little bit more to build off of next season, even if the dynamics are a little different. Paolo has the ball a little bit more. Markelle has the ball a little bit more. The ball handling responsibilities are a little bit more spread out than they were last season. I think he's a guy to watch out for. I say Cole because I think there's been a whole lot of conversation I've seen at least with him, just like, hey, Cole Anthony's role, 6-man starter. Hey, he can't be a starter, X, Y, and Z. I mean, Cole, I know that there are warts to his game, or there are things he needs to definitely improve on, but he's got the talent in the work ethic to get to a different level. And I think this, if he's I think he's a guy who's going to buy in. There's an ecosystem, I think, in place to help him get to that different level of his career. And when I mean different level, just a more consistent level. You had a peak of it at the beginning of the season before he started dealing with the ankle injuries, right? And that really hampered, that really took down a part of the season. Like, if you look pre-ankle injuries, like what I was dealing with them, and then post-ankle injuries, it was a different level of player. So you get the offseason healthy, work on his game. And I think there's aspects of his game that were maybe overlooked because of all the flashy, great shooting nights. I think he's a better passer than people believe he is. And I know that's because, he takes a lot of shots, but there's a level of passing that he may buy into this season that will help Mace. Maybe it's not going to be like this humongous statistical jump. I'm not saying he's going to average 25 points, but there's going to be, I guess, a little bit more maybe as the season long reliability, if that makes sense.
Now, with that being said, you talked about Cole Anthony's role next season. The expectation amongst Magic fans is that he will be the 6th man of the team. Jalen Suggs starts at the 2. If that were the case, and you got Cole Anthony as the 6th man, do you think that he would embrace that role? And if not, what role do you see him playing in the team next season?
Yeah, I think I think if Coach Mosley and the coaching staff say, hey, this is the best role that we see fit, and have a conversation with him about it, I think he's going to buy into it and just do the best that he can do. I don't think there's a bad move. Like, I don't think there's a bad choice between, we're assuming the other starters are Markelle, Franz, Wendell, and Paolo. So it's like, are you going to start Jalen? Are you going to start Cole? Whatever it may be. I don't think there's, like, quote unquote, a bad choice. It's almost like based off how do you want to start. Sometimes I think starting lineups are a little overstated just because guys start. Like, if Cole starts, if Cole comes off the bench, he's still going to come in and play 25, 26, 27, probably even more minutes a game. Like, that guard rotation is going to be completely, pretty even, I would imagine. Cole may, I'm not saying this is going to happen. Cole may come off the bench and play more minutes than Jalen. It just may work out like 27 versus 25 minutes a night or 28 versus 26. So I think whatever the role is, he's just going to play his style, play his game regardless. And I think he can do that regardless of what if he's starting, coming off the bench. It's his role is, I guess, he as a player is he is who he is as a player.
Yeah, and when it comes to the starting lineups, I feel like people have really made that like a massive debate, right? Which guard are you going to start? And then if we get Jonathan Isaac back, like fully healthy, what do you do with Jonathan Isaac? The Orlando Magic, we were the second worst team in the NBA, and we got the number 1 pick. So we're assuming that Paolo is going to remain the starter. How could you not start your number 1? But Jonathan Isaac, it's no secret that we've viewed him as being the most talented player on the roster. What do you do with Jonathan Isaac if he's healthy?
I think you do what I think most people would expect from this Magic group. You let him come back slowly. What I mean by that is he's going to be in the rotation, but likely in the bench role. Coming off the bench, playing. His minutes will probably increase incrementally as time goes on. I mean, as we say this out loud, but I feel like sometimes it gets forgotten. Like, he's missed over 2 years of playing time. And I know I know we just had Klay Thompson come back, and he jumped back into the starting lineup almost immediately, or maybe he did immediately. I forget. I think he did come back in the starting lineup his first game back. But a lot of times,
it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. You got to work yourself back. And even he was starting, but his minutes were they were restricted minutes. So it's kind of weird. He would play the first 5 minutes of the first quarter, and then you may not see him again until the second quarter, right? Or late in the second quarter. So he'd be on the bench for a decent amount of time. But yeah, he's missed, by the time October rolls around, I'm pretty sure it's been 26 months of time that he just hasn't played. So yeah, I'm not expecting them to throw him out there and be like, all right, you get a starting job and et cetera, X, Y, and Z, or you're playing major high level minutes. It's I truly do believe they're going to slow play it. They're going to take their time with him, just kind of like they did with Markelle. Even if it has been more time, that's just kind of been their MO to me. Just being around the team, they're not going to rush him. They're not going to rush his minutes. They're just going to let it be. And really, for the team, there's incentive, but you already have other bodies to go. It's not like you're oh, we need to fill in this time. We need to get you back because we have no other guy. You got Mo. I guess I should say you got the Mos. You got the Mos. You got Wendell, you got Paolo, you got Shuma, you got Franz who can slide up too. You have so many guys who can fill that 4-5 spot, 4-5-3 spot. So it's kind of there's no from the team side, there's very little need to rush him, and I think they're going to take their time, however they see fit. But I would be, all that to say, if he starts at least from day one, I would be quite surprised.
Now, if you see this roster staying intact, so Terrence Ross stays, this is it. We're going to next season with this roster. What are your personal projections for this team? What do you think they're capable of doing? And what do you actually think they'll do next season, assuming things, again, stay as they are?
Yeah, well, one, they're going to have to make it. But they don't have to think about this now. But at some point, they have, once they sign everybody, once they sign Mo, officially sign him, once they officially sign Caleb, once they officially Houston, and once they officially sign Bol, they'll have 16 guys. You can carry up to 20 guys during the offseason, but you'll need to get to 15 standard roster spots by the beginning of the season. So someone will have to be cut from the equation, unfortunately. But this is a team I could see them making. Someone asked me, I think maybe a couple weeks ago, their range. I could see this being a 32-ish to 36-ish win team. Just off of self-improvement, a healthier team. I don't think that's without the question. I know that sounds like a 10-win jump, but as we were talking about earlier, I think some of the injury misfortune and just the direction of the season kind of, muddled, whatever you want to say, like the perception of like what the team could be. I don't see why they couldn't get to like at least 32 wins, 33 wins, 34, which would be for a team that gets the number one pick and then the following season. That's pretty significant. I've looked at the history of number one picks, at least recently. Usually when you get the number one pick, you make a marginal improvement if you make any in terms of the win column. Like I'm talking about, you may win like 2 to 3 or 4 more games next season. To win 10 more games when you're that low is easier than if you're going from like 30 to 40 or 40 to 50. You know what I'm saying? But it's still like something that isn't seen a lot. But there's also more young talent on this team than you usually get when you get the number one pick.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point, just because you can pinpoint in one too many factors on why the record was what it was. Health is definitely one, but then you take a look at development from Franz, from Cole, hopefully RJ Hampton. You start bringing all these players back that are feeling more comfortable playing with one another, and then us not really focusing too much on maybe because with the injuries there's so many replacements and players that we had to pull from our Lakeland team and our two ways and whatever the case may be. I can definitely see there being a larger growth, but are we looking at playing? Is that a real possibility?
I personally,
should that be an expectation for the team?
That's tough, because I mean, to me, if you get to playing, I mean, because what was the playing like? Who were the playing teams last year? Cleveland, Atlanta,
Charlotte.
There has to be one more.
Okay. Was it Brooklyn?
Brooklyn, there we go.
Brooklyn.
Yes, there we go. Yeah, because it was Brooklyn versus Cleveland, and then Charlotte versus Atlanta. I mean, I think all those teams won, I want to say 38 to 40 games.
So the 10th seed was Charlotte. They won 43 games.
They won 40. See, there we go. I didn't realize they won 43. So I mean, like, let's say,
I didn't realize it was that high.
Yeah.
43.
Yeah.
I knew Charlotte was 10 because I remember that game, the Charlotte Atlanta beat in Atlanta, but I didn't realize I completely forgot I thought they had like a 40 and 42 or 41 and 41. I didn't realize they got to 43. But yeah, I mean, that's a tough jump. Like, so let's even say like, the number, because Charlotte, I think, is going to be worse this year than they were last year. But let's say that they get to, 38 wins. Like, that's a 16-win improvement that you're expecting from last year's team. I think that's so to me, I don't think the play-in's expectation, just because the growth or the jump in win percentage is just so. I mean, I could see them doing it just because there is so much young talent on this team. There is so much. There could be a lot more growth. I mean, you talked about. You mentioned vets. You mentioned Markelle and Ji as vets. I mean, to me, like Wendell is kind of in that space, right? Wendell and Mo Bamba, like, they're young vets. They're entering their 5th seasons of their career. Like, this is when you start turning into. They're still young players, but they can be called young vets in a way. So there are guys who can help make that step, but that's a lot. You rarely see that kind of jump, especially the year one after having the number one pick. I think year 2, so Paolo Banchero second season, that's definitely an expectation without a doubt. I wouldn't even rule out playoffs. Like we even saw with Cleveland this year. What was this? This was year 3 for Darius Garland. I know he's not number one pick, but year 3 for you, like whatever your cornerstone player is, or along with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Like year 3 of Darius Garland, you had in the second season, or I guess after a half season of Jared Allen, then you make the jump. But having for the jump this season, I wouldn't be shocked by it. But that's just like that would be a lot. It would be impressive too, because like I said, it's not something you see often.
Yeah, if it's something that you did see, I mean, at that point, we're looking at most improved player of the year. We're looking at coach of the year. We're looking at a lot of the accolades to be able to get a team to jump that high. And just to kind of put it in perspective, I mean, we're looking at Knicks that were in the 11th seed at 37 wins, Wizards that were in 12th with 35, and then the Pacers kind of dipped a lot more with 25 wins. So definitely a major jump if we wanted to get into that plan for sure.
Yeah, that, like I said, I'm not ruling it out because, like I said, maybe the East is the bottom, not the bottom, like the middle of the East is a little bit worse. You mentioned the Pacers. they're in a different direction. I mean, they traded Brogdon. I don't know what's going to happen with Miles Turner. Like, their teams, I think they're going to come down a little bit. Atlanta's going up to me. Brooklyn, who knows what they're going to do? But more than likely than not, they're going to come down. So there's going to be movement. But can the Magic win enough games? Or maybe the quality of that middle is not going to be as good as last year, where, maybe 37 wins gets the 10s instead of, 43 you needed last year. Maybe it does. And maybe that's how, Orlando could sneak in. But I also know Orlando's priority is going to remain the development of these young guys and getting their opportunities. So if the opportunity is there, I mean, I think play-in is very recent. Recent history suggests that the play-in is actually a very good thing for young players. I'm thinking about Memphis.
Right.
They were in it twice, right? They were in the play-in against Portland the first time it happened in the bubble, and then they were in it 2021. They played Golden State. I forget they played, I think, San Antonio, then Golden State, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, I think, and then you can get that. It's almost like a microwave playoff experience. Even if you lose, you get the feel of like do or die, stakes, the adjustments, everything. So I think the play-in's a cool concept, not just because it's cool to follow on, but I think it actually does help young guys get a better feel for, hey, this is what these kind of games feel like. This is what playoff games feel like.
And I think that's the part that's going to be the funness is being able to see exactly what major impacts, Paolo will have on the other guys. One of the main reasons why Paolo was so attractive is the fact that we really haven't had that go-to piece. And we feel as if, Paolo may be that. And then Khobi, kind of going into our last question before we wrap it up. This one's for you personally, but how do you intend to cover the Orlando Magic kind of differently this upcoming year based on something that maybe you've learned, this past season? Is there anything that you would tweak differently or how you would change your approach?
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely learned. I think some of it would be a little bit more in depth, a little bit more, I guess, beneath the surface, I'm going to call it that, in terms of coverage, in terms of stories. There are ideas that sometimes you have that you're just like, I don't know if I'm going to do this because like the timing of it, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I'll probably use more time to go a little bit more in depth on stories that I kind of scratched the surface on last season. Like some of those stories that may have been like more surface level, like dive a little bit deeper into explaining, why this happened. Like, why did the Magic do this in this game? Or why has this trend been like this the past few games? Diving a little bit more into the specifics and explaining the ins and out a little bit better. I guess an example would be, looking to this past season, why does the Magic defensive rating improve so much when Jalen Suggs is on the floor? Is it all Jalen? Is it the lineups he plays in? Is it something he's doing, something that his teammates around him are doing? Like that kind of stuff, like that, a little bit deeper, so there can be a little bit of greater understanding of what's happening both on and off the floor.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we definitely look forward to finding out. You're going to be in Vegas, so we're definitely going to hear some of the things coming out of there. Really excited to kind of see how the Orlando Magic play out throughout this summer league. So a lot of exciting stuff definitely coming up this week. Khobi, I want to take the time to say thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. If you aren't already following Khobi, make sure that you follow him on Twitter at Khobi_Price. That's KHOBI_Price. And then if you haven't already subscribed to Orlando Sentinel, it's definitely a big definite must do, because this is where you get all the inside scoops on everything happening with the Orlando Magic. On that note, Khobi, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's a wrap. Catch you guys next week.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the OZone Podcast, the voice of Magic fans. For all the latest Orlando Magic news and updates, follow us on Twitter at the OZone Pod and on Instagram at Orlando Magic HQ. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on all your favorite podcast listening platforms.